Good morning, and thank you for joining us for SBB Live. I am your host and the publisher of Seniors Blue Book, Amanda Barton, and I'm really excited today to be joined by a resident of the beautiful Abor Trace, and his name is Mr. Ray Malone. How are you today, Ray?
I'm fine, and I hope I can help you.
Oh, yes, you'll be able to help me. I am going to just ask you to tell me all about yourself, and I want to make sure I correct myself. Your last name is Maloney, right?
Maloney, correct.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We appreciate having you on the show. Just tell me a little history of yourself and what brought you to Florida.
Okay, let me back up a little and start. We grew up in Long Island, New York. I guess you can tell by my accent. Most of my life I lived in Connecticut where I worked, but I was born in Brooklyn as a poor Irish kid. And when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December, remember, 1941, I was 19 years old. So I was the perfect age to go to war. So like everybody in those days, I enlisted in the Army Air Corps and went through flight training and got my wings and became a fighter pilot. And I was sent to Europe for the European War, France and Italy. I flew P-47 Thunderbolts. I don't know if that means anybody, but I flew out of both places, France and Italy. And on my 37th mission, I was shot down. I hate to admit, I was shot down by a train. We were shooting up the train, and the train had anti-aircraft on it, and it fired back, and I got hit. And I was trying to get my airplane back to southern Italy, where my base was, and it just wouldn't make it. It finally quit on me when it fired. And my wingman in another aircraft was calling and telling me that I was smoking. And so as long as I could, I kept this airplane headed south, and finally the engine quit finally. And I sunk into the Apennine Mountains at the time. And at the last few seconds, I recognized that I was down in a valley, and there was, hills on both sides. And there was no exit. This was a dead end valley. So I knew there was nothing I could do but bail out. And so I quickly bailed out. But my problem was I was too low, and I hit the ground way too hard. My wingman that I heard later, many years later, said in his report that he didn't think I made it because he never saw the chute, blossom out and shape. And about 20 minutes later, Germans got a hold of me, captured me. So I ended up, shot down, wounded, captured by the Germans. The last 6 months of the war, I did it in a German prison camp, and then back to the States. And I stayed in the Air Force. I loved flying. And I actually went back to Germany on occupation and flew for another 3 or 4 years. And finally, when we transitioned into the jets, they were starting to give me real problems with back problems. And so they gave me a choice. Either I stay in the Air Force and I'd have to come off flying status, or be retired for disability. So I retired. So I came out of the Air Force. I had not gone to college. As I say, I was a poor Irish kid from Brooklyn. So I went to the, the thing that Congress started, the GI Bill of Rights. So I went through college, finished in Connecticut, and I didn't want to go to work in New York. And so a neighbor of mine who worked at Sikorsky Aircraft, building helicopters in Connecticut, asked me if I would like to come down and talk to them. And so I did, and they hired me. And I just took it as a kind of a temporary thing until I decided what I was going to do. But 33 years later, I retired, And then we were still living in Connecticut. I lived there 40 years. I wanted to do something with my brain. So I thought I'd write a book. And I was a history buff, and one of the stories I always liked was Mutiny on the Bounty, because I was a sailor. I lived on Long Island, on the Connecticut shore there, and I had a sailboat for 40 years. And so I decided I'd write this book. So I started the research. I spent a lot of time in England going through their archives and all that kind of about Captain Bligh. I went to the Pacific several times. I ended up in Australia, spent a month in studying in Australia, because Captain Bligh at his last official function was the governor of New South Wales in Australia. So the Australians look on Captain Bligh as one of their founders. You know, they even have a statue of him in Sydney Harbor. And so I spent weeks and weeks there and came back, and I started to write, but a lot of my friends were asking. I had a lot of slides. I took a lot of pictures. And they said, we'd like to see the slides. So I put them in chronological order, and I gave a presentation speech, and I just seemed to blow them away. They thought it was great. So I got into the lecture end of it and ended up something over 100 presentations I made. And my last several were in the South Pacific on cruise ships. So my wife and I were doing these cruises to the South Pacific. And as you can tell by my voice was beginning to give out too. And after 18 years of snowbirding back and forth, we had a place in Bonita Bay, a condo there, and we decided it was time to look into, we were going to need some help here pretty soon, because we were getting on in age. I hate to admit it, my wife hates me for it, but I'm now 90, I'm coming up on 98, and my wife is 94. So, and she's my only, we've been married once, 76 years, one wife. And I sometimes make jokes of introducing her as my first wife, because that kind of keeps her on her toes. Happy as can be. When we started looking about 4 years ago, and we went to, must be 10 or 12 places, didn't like any of them, but we knew the area and we knew we wanted to be in this area. And we got so desperate that we hired a consultant on the retirement homes. You know, we talked to him for a while, and he kept asking us, have you tried Arbor Trace? And I said, Arbor Trace? I never heard of it. I don't know where it is. So we said, why don't you try Arbor Trace? So we thought, all right, we did. So we drove over here from Bonita Bay. It was a few minutes. Drove through it, and everything we saw, we liked it. We loved it. We wanted a small place. We wanted it off the ground floor, but at the same time, our wife didn't want 15 stories. So we found these mid-rise apartments, and we thought that was the kind of stuff we would like. We drove around, we saw the facilities, and one of the crusher, the thing that finally, convinced us, when we started to talk to folks here, we found out that the entrance fee, and every place I had looked, there was this entrance fee of $100,000 and so forth. And you were going to lose that if you lived for 4 years. And we found out coming to Arbor Trace that they had this unique policy that your so-called entrance fee was the price you were going to pay for the condo that you were going to live in and buy. So it's going to be yours. You can paint it purple if you want, or do whatever you want. And the lovely thing, when we died, my kids would have a free condo where they could sell it or do whatever they want. So it was an investment more than an entrance fee that just disappeared in 3 or 4 years. So that was the first great thing that we saw about Arbor Trace. Then we found out, talking with the folks here, that you also had another thing going for you, in that the whole complex, Arbor Trace, was managed by the homeowners. We thought, this is a no-brainer. We shouldn't go any further. Everything we looked, we liked. One of the things I was hoping that I would get away with my wife. She played golf, but I didn't play golf. So I didn't want to go to a place that had a golf course, because then I'd be paying for fees to maintain the golf course and never use them. So I thought, I don't want to find a place. I want to find a place without a golf course. And lo and behold, Arbor Trace didn't have a golf course. So that was another plus for Arbor Trace. And then I walked around and I saw that lake. And I was a sailor for 40 years on Long Island Sound. I had one sailboat after another. Down here, they have this little model sailboat. And down here, it's a big thing. They have a number of these retirement homes have model yacht sailing clubs. And I saw the lake and I thought, that's another plus. So all of these things, and I've forgotten, I think it was Jennifer here, took us to dinner here. We had a lovely dinner, the people we liked, and everything was a plus. It was a no-brainer win-win, So we called up Jennifer and said, we'd like to move in. Do you have a place? At that point, they didn't, and put us on a list, and we were sweating that out for, I think, just a few months. It wasn't very long. And they called and said, come and look at a place in the mid-rise, the building 9. And so we came over and my wife looked at it and said, she loves it. We still love it. We're living in it. And everything is just couldn't be better. Like it. We love the people that we've made good friends with a lot of people here. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just one thing after another is good.
I want to say this is definitely one of the most interesting interviews I've ever done. I've really enjoyed hearing your stories. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you, and I want to thank you for your service. That's one of the first things I want to make sure to tell you. What an interesting story.
I rattled off something, I don't know, but it helps.
It does. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to meet you.